This talk is supported by Small PDF, the successful Swiss scale-up making PDF easy for over 1 billion people around the world since 2013. You may remember them from a previous podcast we hosted with their CEO, Dennis Just. Their mission is to make PDFs and life easy for people across the world, a mission made possible with their 90-plus amazing employees across Zurich, Belgrade, and Barcelona. If you want to join this fast-growing Swiss scale-up, visit smallpdf.com/Swisspreneur and apply.
So we think that we can deliver people in 1 hour, 2 hours everywhere in the globe. Maybe it will be 10 times more people flying. And if this system will be not carbon neutral, then we can become the largest emitter of the carbon in the world. So it's not sustainable.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Mikhail, a very warm welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're the founder and CEO at Destinus, an aerospace company building hyperplanes to provide the fastest transportation on Earth. That's just a mind-blowing concept that, of course, we're going to talk about in a minute. But first, I want to learn more about your personal background. You originally come from Russia, and in your university studies, you combined physics and also business. Why did you decide to combine the two? That's not a very common combination.
I actually didn't combine it. So I studied physics, and that was beginning of 90s, where it was difficult to build the career in physics in Russia. Mm-hmm. So I started my entrepreneurial career, being basically a student, and built a couple companies until I realized that I don't have enough knowledge also on the business side, financial side. So I got in a way, several, educations to be more familiar with the business.
So it was basically, you saw, there's a lack, I want to also learn more about that, and then you just jumped right into it.
Yep.
Fantastic. And of course, we are recording this interview in April in 2022. Of course, if we talk about Russia, everybody also thinks about the Ukrainian war that is happening right now. How do you feel about that? What does that do to you at the moment?
So it is definitely a tragedy for Ukraine and also actually for Russia, because we've been building democratic and westernized Russia for 3 decades, and was trying to build a country which can be the family of the Europe and be part of the Europe. And what we see, unfortunately, for the last, I would say, 10 years plus. I mean, it started definitely when Mr. Putin became a president, but especially it's accelerated after 2012 when he came back after Medvedev. We're moving in a very wrong direction, and finally, country not only become authoritarian or totalitarian, but also it's moved to the fascism. So basically, trying to tell to the people around how to live. Mm-hmm. And for let's say for all people in Russia who don't agree with this, it's also start to be pretty difficult and tough, because in Russia, even for calling this a war, you can get up to 15 years in a prison.
That's crazy.
If you just call this a war.
The situation that you described, the change more going towards a fascist regime, basically, was that also one of the reasons why you then decided to leave Russia and study abroad? You went to Stanford, for example.
I was involved in opposition activity since beginning of 2000s. So I was helping, for example, to Mikhail Kokorich, who was the billionaire who sit more than 10 years in a prison. I was helping him actually before he was put in a prison, beginning of 2000s, to open Russia Foundation in Siberia. And then over the years, I was helping to basically every democratic force. I mean, I was let's say, the medium-sized entrepreneur, but the big guys tried not to help because for them it was politically difficult, and right. The people like me, the basically middle entrepreneurs, helped them financially. But until maybe 2012, 2014, it was accepted activity. I mean, the people who was involved in opposition activity was not treated extremely, let's say, harsh. I mean, somebody is like Mikhail Kokorich. But after 2014, when the situation changed, when basically if you are not agree, you are against. Yeah, then it's become tough. I mean, it was political assassinations, like Mr. Nemtsov was assassinated just in front of the Kremlin. And then at that time, I decided to immigrate from Russia because I understood I don't have any business future, because with my political views, it was basically impossible to do the business. But also the personal, I mean, finally now it's just dangerous personally. So I've not been in Russia for many, many years.
And how did then this international education, at Stanford, for example, shape you? Because I can imagine that also has an impact on you, that does something to you when you then go out there in the world and travel and live in other places.
I've been in a different international, educations or courses since, basically I remember in the beginning of 2000s, I was part of the Russian entrepreneurs who've been in Georgetown University. Then I studied in the National University of Singapore for summer course. And then when I moved to US, I take executive MBA in Stanford. And first, I mean, it definitely helped me to shape myself as a businessman and entrepreneur. I know that this is a view that, hey, the MBA is good only for managers.
Right.
But it's not true. It's actually not true. I mean, there are some brilliant entrepreneurs who basically, without any education, build great companies, but I think it's rather exception. Yeah. So if you really want to be experienced entrepreneur, if you want to build a company and be focused on the main thing, like how to build your product, how to build your technology, how to create competitive barriers, you need to know other things, and you need to basically master in other things, like the personal management, the finance, HR, leadership. If you don't know this, then you basically, instead of building your company and your product, you're learning the stuff. So, and business school and good business education gave you this, basically it's a basic education that's necessary for the business.
Right. And you also have a very impressive track record as a founder. You already built multiple companies. And I just wonder, was entrepreneurship always there? Was that always the obvious career choice for you? Or where does your entrepreneurial drive come from?
I think it's a combination of two things. First, back in the 90s in Russia, I didn't have too many options to build a career. So, because to build a career at that time, it was kind of wild capitalism, yeah. So difficult to build a career somewhere, and you got to build something by yourself, or you need to go abroad and basically build your future outside. But that time in Russia was very interesting because it was like Wild West. Economy was booming, new opportunities. We've been able, for example, to build a retail company from one store to hundreds to 10,000 people in 10 years. I mean, how we can do this?
That's amazing.
It was amazing. It was amazing time. At the same time, I started my first, let's say, entrepreneurial attempts when I was actually a student and schoolboy. The first my earnings was when I was a schoolboy. So I was producing this, pit pots. This it was actually Soviet Union when this pit pots in Siberia was very important because you put the plants like potatoes, like cucumbers, tomatoes, and grow this inside your house. And then you put it on open soil because the spring is starting very late, May, in Siberia. And this pit pots was very difficult to buy. It was, we call it deficit. Everything was deficit. It was impossible to buy. So I decided to build it by myself, but not from the pit because we didn't have a pit, but from the cow manure. So basically I built a press, and I spent several weeks trying to find the proper mixture between the sand, between this manure and stuff like this, before I started to build this a good pots. And then I was selling couple summers and earned quite a lot of money, more than my parents, maybe several times, by selling these manure pots.
How old were you back then?
14 maybe, 13, 14.
Crazy. And nowadays you're active in the aerospace area. So I also wonder, where does that fascination come from? I mean, of course, many people dream about, flying planes or something like that. But when did that fascination for you about the aerospace area really start?
It's actually a very interesting observation, but if you look at the first generation of the space or aerospace founders, even like Elon Musk and Bezos and the Virgin, like Branson, they've not been actually professional aerospace engineers. And this is only a few examples, but actually it was much more. And I think the reason was that they and I also, I don't want to put myself with a line with them, but not being a professional aerospace engineers, we didn't know how hard it is.
Do you think that this helps?
I think if we knew back at the time how hard it is, it actually was, I would say 10 times harder than initially I was thinking. When I started my first company, it was much harder. Mm-hmm. But over the time, you just become more professional and just know how to do the things, and you just feel that you can do the stuff. But I was enthusiast of the space since I was a child. My generation I call the Voyager generation. So when I was a schoolboy, the Voyagers, it was approaching the planets giants, the Jupiter, Saturn, and it was no internet at that time, but I was in a library and see these photos of these breathtaking moons of the Jupiter, Io, Callisto, Ganymede, Europa, Titan, I know the Saturn moon, and it was so unbelievably that something was created by humans was there. And since that time, I definitely had a addiction, and I was building small planes, small rockets. So when I sold my retail company and had a little bit money to kind of play different stuff, I decided to start my first aerospace company.
Amazing. And then actually in 2021, actually not that long ago, you founded Destinus as a solo founder. And I wonder what you actually want to do is you want to reduce the distance. You want to basically make it possible for logistical goods to be transported to any place in the world within less than 2 hours. I mean, that claim already is mind-blowing, but what actually led you to that? Was distance ever a problem to you, or why did you decide to tackle that problem?
We, as a humans, we measure distance not by kilometers, but by hours, or by days, old days, maybe days or weeks, because we say, hey, it's like 2 hours of flight, 3 hours of flight. And by flying faster, finally we shrink our globe, because then distance becoming smaller. And it's not that something was not thought before. I mean, even during the Second World War, the German engineer Zanger was designing the rocket plane, which supposedly should be like bombing the United States and landing in Japan, basically flying through the space. And then the humans built these deadly machines called ICBM, international, intercontinental missiles, with thousands of them. And the idea of using the rocket technologies to build extremely fast plane was for a long time. And even SpaceX want to use Starship for point-to-point transportation. But we want to build something that looks like a plane, so you can land and take off from the normal airstrip, from airports. And what is interesting, it starts to be possible, or it will be possible only when hydrogen will be available. Because with the hydrogen, you can build incredibly efficient engines, both air-breathing and rocket engines, which can be also very reusable. And also you can use the hydrogen as a cooling for your active cooling system, because by flying so fast, one of the main problem on hypersonic speed is aerodynamic heating.
So it's really only the hydrogen that makes that possible, what you're planning to do, that you can fly that fast, but also that efficient to a certain degree.
Hydrogen definitely one of the main enablers, because in a world without hydrogen, or without available affordable hydrogen, which hopefully will be affordable in like several years, it would be impossible to build this type of the engines and the systems.
Right. And in that regard, you also have a nice positive side effect, right? Because with the hydrogen, you are basically CO2 neutral when you're flying.
This is very important because we don't know, but quite possible that new innovation in aviation that we have now, the aviation become much closer to the people with the super mobility, and then the faster, and will be hopefully cheaper because it will be autonomous. maybe people will be using aviation much more frequently than in the past. Look what happens in the 50s when aviation turbine was invented, when the planes become much more reliable and safer and cheaper, and planes start to be affordable for basically anybody, for middle class. Before this, the planes only for the rich people or for militaries. Yeah. So we think that we can deliver people in 1 hour, 2 hours everywhere in the globe. Maybe it will be 10 times more people flying. And if this system will be not carbon neutral, then we can become the largest emitter of the carbon in the world. So it's not sustainable.
What do you think about the timeline there? When will the hydrogen be available to actually make that transportation available for the masses?
What we see, based on our discussion with the hydrogen producers, with regulators also, in 3-5 years, we will have hydrogen available on some selected airports with a reasonably low price. And something between like 5 and 10 years, it will start to be available almost at any airport. And I think after 10 years, hopefully it will start to be one of the main primary fuels for aviation, because we see even the majors like Airbus is developing, classical planes. They want to build it hydrogen.
Once that will then happen, don't you also fear more competition in the market, or do you still think that there's a good angle, a good USP that you can take with your own hyperplane?
What we are doing is very hard and very unconventional. So I think it will be the same like with the first generation of space entrepreneurs. I think the classical guys think it's impossible.
Yeah. And in that regard, they probably don't even try as hard as you do.
Yeah, I think they will wake up only when we already will be so far.
Nice. Please also share a bit who will actually benefit from Destinus planes, basically. At the moment, you will focus on the transportation of logistics, later maybe even people, flights. So please elaborate a bit more who will benefit from your offering, basically.
The world is connected with logistics. And basically, now you see more and more even industrial processes is built as a just-in-time. Yeah. So when you can deliver fast, you can actually reduce a lot of expenses. For example, you are the oil rig somewhere, and if some critical part is failed, you can basically stop the entire oil rig. So you need either to have the pile of the stocks, or if you can deliver this very fast, you may not need to have this pile of the stocks. So for the just-in-time delivery, for emergency delivery, for perishable things like isotopes, for cancer curing, for the human organs, for something like expensive, which have limited time of the consumption, like, the expensive tuna fish from Spain for the sushi, which can cost like $1,000 per 1 kilogram. For all of this, the time is very important. But we think also that eventually we can be comparable also by price with the conventional aviation. So it means we can substitute in a greater sense almost all conventional transport aviation. And definitely for humans, it will be nothing more exciting than just have a chance to fly to Tokyo to your friend, have a dinner and fly back and sleep at your home in the future. Yeah, it would be like a different life.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're also going to talk about that in a minute, because I'm very curious to see how the world will look like with hyperplanes all around us. One thing I also wondered is, you were active in a very international setting. You had companies, in California, in Canada. Why did you decide to choose Switzerland as the headquarter for Destinus?
It's a good question, yeah. And I spent almost 10 years in the United States, in California, and definitely this is a very vibrant place. And I think it formed me as an entrepreneur. I mean, after Siberia, after Russia, which also was a little bit Wild West, at that time. Then I came to California, which in aerospace was very Wild West at that time. So I remember I was translating Elon Musk to head of the Russian Space Agency for 3 hours when nobody knew actually Elon Musk. It was 2011 or 2012. It was very early days. And I know all these first guys who built it. I met with Elon Musk, with Bezos, had a dinner with Branson at the time when nobody knew about that they're doing this stuff. So it was a very cool time. But what I see now, it's a time for Europe to rise. Europe was lagging like US in many, let's say, entrepreneurial endeavors. Look, in Europe, you don't have your own like Google, no own Facebook, like there are no basically own Apple, so no infrastructure. And I think it was because here's like the tolerance to failure is much less than in California, in the US. And so the entrepreneurs was very cautious and didn't try to think big. But now I think the Europe is actually start to be more interesting place. It's like in US 20 years ago, where really people see that it's possible. So you can get the brilliant engineers because you have less competition. The investors, after especially coronavirus, can invest anywhere. For my previous company, I raised the pipe before IPO from my home, 150 million without any roadshow, which was impossible.
Right.
And now I raised money. Basically, I didn't meet with majority of my investors face to face, only through Zoom and Teams. So the time is different. You can really build your business where it makes sense. And here is less competition, more support from the governments, better access to the talent pool, and capital is now global. I have majority of my investors from US, somebody from Europe, from Middle East, from Asia. So the capital become very global.
That's a very interesting observation that the geographical location plays less and less of an important role. Do you think Switzerland then in that regard, with our life quality that we have here, is that helpful for you in any way to attract the best talent? Or what role does Switzerland as, a high quality living place play in that regard?
You see, like California, it's the most expensive place in the US. Yeah. So in the Bay Area, to buy the house, it's impossible, basically, if you not like have good options or you're not founder or venture capitalist. But still, people go in there and working because it's a place with opportunities, it's high quality of life. And if you really need to attract somebody extremely highly qualified, if you're in California, you can attract it. If you are in, I would say, somewhere in Northern Dakota, it will be difficult to get everybody. You can still probably get people, but not already everybody. So California was universal magnet, and the Switzerland is the same because it's a highest possible quality of life. It's democratic country. It's it's proximity of basically all major European cities. It's international, so people who speak English or German or French or Italian can feel like at home here. Yeah, so you can, for example, our office is Canton de Vaud, which is close to German-speaking, French-speaking. So you can pick. I mean, you can go with your kids on a German-speaking. You can be French-speaking. You can go to international school, which is very important. And I think in the modern world, the quality of the life for highly qualified people is very important. This is the reason why Switzerland, despite it's a very expensive place, it's one of the most attractive places for businesses.
Perfect. If you need to build a great website design or would like to upgrade your existing site, Tesnadi & Co. are a digital agency with expertise in building websites fast and efficiently. I can tell you from my personal experience working with them at RentTouch that they have an incredibly competent and responsive team. The tool they use is Webflow, a no-code website builder with growing popularity. And this means you get a clean code and no restrictions on how the website looks. Your design can be customized to exactly how you envision it, unlike what happens with theme-based website builders. It's also very easy and cost-effective to maintain, edit, and expand your site. And you can have a simple website up and running in a week for a very reasonable fee. Go to tesnadi.net/webflow to find out more. Again, that's tasnadi.net/webflow. I also want to talk about the challenges that you faced along the way so far of building Destinus. Although it doesn't seem like it has been a long time, like 1 year basically, there's so much that happened. And I want to start with the complexity and difficulty to actually build hyperplanes. How do you go about that? I mean, that's crazy. You build a prototype in just 4 months, I think. How the hell do you pull that off? That's like next level.
I think the main difference between us and more classical players that we built not only airframe, most, let's say, plane producers, this great company Pilatus, they building excellent planes, but in aviation it's very rarely the same company built airframe and the engine. Yeah, usually by engine.
Right.
In our situation, because we really try to change the paradigm, we need to build also engine by ourselves, because we cannot buy these engines. It's like a SpaceX. They are building engines by themselves. They cannot come to Aerojet Rocketdyne and say, hey, build engine for us. No, they need to build engine by themselves. It makes our stuff harder, but also simpler. Yeah, why? Because we can build this first engine prototypes, which is much smaller than the big one. So we can start with a small scale, like with basically, half a ton, 1 ton, 2 ton thrust, which is a reasonably small engines that can be built. We don't need to build them extremely reliable. We can build it from simple materials, so it can last for hundreds of hours to test the stuff before we go to the next level of complexity. And then when we build the airframe, it's actually the smaller the airframe, it's easier and cheaper to build because everything is cheaper. The materials can be built cheaper, actuators, the permissions and flying. So our first prototype was 50 kilograms, the second 150, the third will be, few hundred kilograms, and then the next one will be several tons. So we're growing. And in planes, it's like this. I mean, you have plenty of people who can build, 50, 100 kilogram plane. You have several, maybe 1,000 who can build like a half a ton. You have like several dozens who can build like several ton vehicle, and only few who can build a big one. Yeah, and the beauty of us that we can build, start from small and learn a lot in basically how they behave the engine, how behave the vehicle, aerodynamics, and I think this iterative approach, instead of like trying to say, okay, we immediately build something big. No, let's build something small and test. This year we are building 3 prototypes, which for the small company, less than 100 people, is incredible, but it's because we simplify rather than make it complex. I think the core here, the focus on simplification.
I think that's mind-blowing. You basically sort of, applied the agile mindset to the aerospace industry, something that most people, as you mentioned before, like the big players, probably think is just not possible. In that regard, when do you think the hyperplanes will launch? Are they already flying, or when can we see them flying around? Well, probably they are too fast to see, but we'll hear them probably.
It's actually very good that you told about agile, because our company built basically with the same model like many software company. We use, in a bigger sense, a Spotify approach with basically all company built on several teams, which is each team with a multidisciplinary people focus on some tasks to build engine, to build airframe, the next iteration plane. And then we have chapters with engineering, excellence areas like mechanical, electrical engineering, propulsion, and also we are doing this in an agile manner with sprints, 8-week sprints. So our 8-week sprints it's exactly like software basically, and we try to release the new stuff. Maybe not new engine, but next iteration of the design. Basically 8 weeks for each team, and it makes this our pace, the way how we move it. So I think we can have some first product for what we can get money in 2-3 years. It will not be the commercial hyperplane. It probably will use for some special things like reconnaissance, observation, test. Because for real commercial use, you need to have certification. And first, the certification procedures is still like a designing, like in a process by regulators. And it will take like a few years actually to go through certification. But we see the multiple special needs markets where we can already start to generate early revenue and test our vehicles and fly before we move to the full commercial, before we can take off from Zurich airport.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, that's actually also one point I wanted to talk about, this regulatory challenges. I mean, I understand there are probably difficult and different processes between the logistics transportation, the logistic flights and the people flights, the commercial flights, so to speak. How do you actually go about that? Are there any big risks that you invest a lot of time in developing a product and then they don't give you the certification? Do you have any safety challenges that you need to pay attention to there? Because I can imagine that's a very complex matter. How do you solve that?
I think in general, the regulation and safety in aviation is easier than, for example, in the cars. Yeah.
Okay.
Look in the driverless cars, how hard it is, And the reason is because the cars is single dimensional. Yeah, it's like, it's 2 dimensions, and then it's like everybody driving, the smart, not smart people, not drunk,
Sure.
So then you need to be very cautious when you build an autopilot, stuff like this. In aviation, it's simpler. First, you have like 3 dimensions, and we open in the new dimension because we're going to fly at much higher altitude, 30, 40, 50, 60 kilometers, where the actually conventional planes are not flying. Nobody there. Nobody there. So it's a basically you like open the new roads, new highways. So, and also we can cross the like a populated, let's say, aerospace in basically 5 minutes. Yeah. So then we go out of 10 kilometers and it's already there where nobody there. Yeah. And also all aviation move in the same directions. So hydrogen, safety, this like all aviation, like now try to implement this regulation. Hydrogen is actually safer than kerosene, because in case of the, let's say, unfortunate case of the, for example, crash, the kerosene is burning for hours, and hydrogen just go up. Yeah, it's light. It's never stick. You don't have fire after hydrogen. Autopilots. This is the whole aviation moving to this direction. Even commercial airplanes want to have 1 pilot instead of 2 pilots in a cockpit. The fast speed, it's also plenty of companies, SpaceX. In US, you have like 3, supersonic startups, and then including the Boeing, you have at least like 2 or 3 hypersonic startups. And last time with the Concorde US, who actually killed the opportunity flying over the US for the Concorde because there was no competition. And now because US basically have predominantly these US startups doing this, so US actually is more active. And then because everybody just copied what US is doing, so hopefully it will be much easier this time.
Absolutely. So there has been, things have been done in the past that should sort of, make the way free for you to excel there on that way.
Yep.
Another third part that I want to talk about is, of course, the capital intensiveness of your startup. I mean, obviously you do need capital. Aerospace is not a cheap space to be active in. You also mentioned it's 10 times harder than you imagined. I can imagine it's probably also 10 times more expensive than people think at the beginning. You raised 29 million seed round so far in February 2022. You are currently fundraising. Please elaborate a bit how capital intense the whole space and the development of such a hyperplane actually is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the hard tech, the reason why it's called hard tech because it's hard. And this is the reason why you see in aerospace, the size of the rounds is much larger. 29 million for seed, it's pretty large for, let's say, a software company. Usually it's Series B for software. Yeah. Or at least it used to be the Series B. I don't know, maybe Series A. We need like hundreds of millions to basically confirm that basic technology is, it's not basic, the technology is working. So build an engine prototypes, start to fly supersonic, hypersonic, to be able to demonstrate main subsystems and show that we can scale it up. And hopefully already with this tech we can build some MVP for special needs, like for reconnaissance test, like a hypersonic test, high altitude tests for. So like with several hundred million, which more or less correspond to how much money do you need to build, for example, small rocket. If you look on Rocket Labs or ABL space or relativity or either aerospace, it's hundreds of millions. Yeah, well, they need to build a rocket. We are in the same domain. To build a real commercial planes, it's billions, for sure. It's billions. But after we will be able to demonstrate that main technology is working, after we will have the first revenue with the MVP and can show that actually the customer interest, then the several $1 billion will not be actually big amount, because look, you have like the company which use like deliver food raising billions of dollars. So hopefully we can raise also.
I really like your, again, agile approach there, right? Because you sort of de-risk to take on a lot of money now, and then if there are problems that come up, right, then you need more money, and that will sort of put your back to the wall, and you are basically, you face your investors and they can say yes or no. But the way that you're doing it, with the small iterations, with the testing, you basically build trust, build proof to then be able to raise the bigger round once you have actually shown, hey, it's working, we can make that bigger now.
I mean, the life of the entrepreneur on early stage, it's you like magician in a circus. You should always have like a new tricks from your sleeves. Yeah, every time. Yeah, so you say, hey, I can do this. You see, and this is normal because we are in this like capital market where you need to demonstrate that you can build a team, you can build your product, where you can like hit the milestones when the people can follow your track records. Your existing investors, your potential investors, new investors,
right.
And when you do this with this agile approach, it's much cooler. And what I also noticed, like moving from classical space, because my previous company was actually in space, all of them, to aviation. That in aviation it's easier to make a small iterations because you are launching by yourself, you are flying by yourself. While in space, especially in older days, you need to wait sometimes years to launch your vehicle to space. It was so expensive. And then you have let's say you raise money, 10 million, and then half of this money actually spent to pay to, I don't know, like Russian space agency to launch Soyuz or to SpaceX, yeah? And it was very painful, to pay for these launches. And then you need to wait like months and years. And then also political stuff start to happen. That's what happened with my previous company, where just basically DoD decided, okay, you're fucking Russian and we don't want to launch your system, yeah? So then, and here you control what you're doing. You don't need anybody.
You're way more independent.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I just don't have dependence. I don't like the government at all.
And where do your investors come from? I mean, your vision, it's a game changer, right? If you can put that into reality, a few years later, the world will look differently if Destinus actually puts that out there and we all see and use and fly the hyperplanes. So who are your investors? Is it difficult to convince them about that vision? Are they eagerly excited to join you along that journey? Or is it more a financial return-driven method? Because it will be a game changer if it works with huge returns. What is sort of the motivation, the profile of the investors behind your company?
It's interesting, but this is like social network around every entrepreneur. You build the social investor network. Yeah. And definitely my first investors were my previous investors who invested in my previous companies. And they basically knew me as an entrepreneur. They knew how I behave. And they put like first money basically at trust, without anything. It was just, slides, me alone, few million. And then I put some money, but they actually I raised money. And then over the time they see it and they start to talk to others. They introduce me to other investors. I meet other investors, and then you just grow your network and get it. At some stage, when we need so much money that basically will be difficult to get this money from venture funds then we can go to the places which can benefit from our existence.
Like what places would that be?
For example, like Saudi Arabia is building the NEOM. Yeah, this is a new large city that in the northern part of Saudi Arabia where they want to basically build a new mobility, new stuff. And this place is pretty far from all main things, flying from NEOM to London, few hours flying from NEOM to New York, to San Francisco, to Tokyo, to Buenos Aires. It's a pretty remote place. So, but they want to build a place with like Dubai, with zero taxes, with good access to infrastructure inside the nature. It's actually pretty good climate because it's close to Sharm el Sheikh. Yeah, so it's a good climate there, beautiful like a sea, the Red Sea, and many people would live there if it would be logistically very easy to connect. This is the reason why Dubai developed their own Emirates, so the best air company in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because people live in Dubai but connected with everywhere. And can you imagine if you can connect a city like NEOM or Dubai with all the world within 1-2 hours? People can live there, pay no taxes or little taxes. They can go to work especially with the modern Zoom Teams. You don't need to fly every day.
Sure.
You can fly once a day, once a week to basically any place in the world for 1 day, for 2 days. It can change the attractiveness of this place because it just make the globe smaller. Now people can live, let's say, in Zurich and work somewhere remote, 1 hour by train, 2 hours by train, go, and now you can live in NEOM or in Dubai or, in Singapore, or in Bali.
Of course, yeah. The world will certainly look different if it gets smaller in that regard and you shorten that transportation time.
And some of these places, they have vision, they have money, so we think that at some stage they can be one of our largest investors.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because you see it's basically shaping and changing the world as you know it today.
Yeah.
So what will be next for you? What will you focus on over the next 12 months? Of course, your fundraising round that is currently ongoing. What else will be on your plate?
So we're going to start flying our second prototype, which is a larger, more powerful, which finally can eventually fly out of the line of sight. So not just around the airport, but for dozens kilometers. We will start to fly. Not only we're now flying in Germany and getting also approval in Switzerland, but we're going to start flying over the ocean in Spain, where we will be getting our permission to fly, so with supersonic speed. So this year we start to flying over the ocean for a few dozens kilometers, initially with a subsonic prototype, and then later this year, early next year, I'm going to fly with a supersonic prototype, which eventually will be also powered by our first engine, the hydrogen engine, and continue to grow, build a team, because when you build a team in 1 year from basically nobody till 100 people, it's challenging. Yeah, it's a lot of mess, artificial mess, which is good. Crisis is always good for the company because then you see who is worse, something, then you can easily check people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what do you think will your role look like in a year from now? What will you be focusing on?
I definitely like to be involved in technology a lot, and I have a excitement, enjoyment to be involved in technology and be one of the our core team defining the strategy for the technology. Definitely setting up the big collaboration partnerships with big logistics players, with big places where we will be putting our hyperports, with national interest players who need to use our technology. This also will be important with investors. The life of entrepreneur is pretty busy because you basically need to spend a lot of time outside and inside, and you are ultimately responsible for everything that's happening in the company. But at the same time, it's exciting. It's when you see that something that was just your idea in your brain, just spark of the thoughts, then create it into something, then dozens of people, then hundreds of people, then maybe thousands of people, including you and people around, start to live with a life that was take a burst out of your thought. It's exciting. It empowers a lot. This is why we like to be entrepreneurs. This is why I cannot imagine another life.
I can imagine that must also be a very rewarding feeling if you then see that things that you imagined are put out in practice and change lives, basically.
Yeah, in reality, a probability to build a successful company is still pretty small, so we should understand. I think in general I have a pretty high score with my last few companies. It's 70-80% success in a different scale. The companies live, continue to build stuff and live their life after me. Yeah. Even I was not the guy who decided that I need to leave them.
Sure.
But they continue to live. And I definitely believe and I hope that Destinus will become a big story with me. And I want to run it and build one of the greatest company to work in, the company that can change the shape of how people live, can get a lot of contribution into a new Europe capabilities, into also the new green economy.
The perfect statement to end the conversation, I would say. Before we wrap up, I have two last parts for you. The first one is I would like to learn about your personal resources and gadgets recommendations. Do you have any books or blogs, newsletters that you can recommend to our listeners?
So with my previous company, I've been in Y Combinator, and actually even it sounds silly, but it's the greatest resource for all entrepreneurs with the different ideas, thoughts, how to build a company, how to build a pitch, how to hire. And in many cases, I just send to my team the links to Y Combinator. It's a really great piece of wisdom, on many stuff. I don't have too much time on reading, the books.
Sure.
I used to read it, and I used to read especially between the businesses when I stopped one. Yeah. Now it's mostly focused on the building stuff. I definitely listen a lot of podcasts, but when you're driving, some books, but unfortunately, you can probably up to 5-10 books per year. This is a maximum what you can. And I try not to now actually read about the business. Try to read about something else, because it's not because I know everything about. I don't know, but I think I know enough not to read.
Sure.
And rather to read something about something interesting. Something because life is not only the business.
Absolutely. We also have some rapid fire questions for you to wrap up. I either give you a question or different options to choose from, and you have to answer in one sentence. You ready?
Yep.
What's your bed and wake up time?
So I try to wake up at 6 and go to bed at 11. But coronavirus give us also opportunity for the short nap. So now I'm accustomed, especially if I have a time to go to have a 30 minutes nap during the day, it's actually helped a lot.
Perfect. If someone offered you a round trip to space right now, where would you go?
Over the moon.
Over the moon?
Yeah, because there are no atmosphere on the moon. So you can fly over the moon at maybe 10, 20 kilometers. You can see the landing sites from Apollo, from Soviet Luna, and it would be the amazing flight.
Awesome. Solo founder or co-founders?
I don't have actually a strong opinion. It depends. For example, in some of my previous company, I was co-founders. Here I was a solo founder because I came kind of alone here. But even I'm like a founder, but I see all my team with whom I started the company, they're basically like a founder. So I think I treat them in the same way.
Yeah. Android or iOS?
Yeah, iOS, because I just I was using this for many years, and it's difficult to move to anything else.
Right. Russia, Switzerland, or Silicon Valley, or the US in that regard?
Switzerland.
Perfect. Mikhail, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you. Lots of success with the ambitious and very interesting and important project that you're working on, and all the best for you and Destinus.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting. And I hope you will help a lot to grow to entrepreneurial community here in Switzerland and in Europe. And I think Europe is only on the rise, and entrepreneurial and next great companies like Apple, Facebook, Google will be born in Europe, and can show that Europe can be also the great place for entrepreneurs.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.